Hell is a rented room with thin walls, a shared bathroom, and a landlord with no boundaries and an insatiable appetite for conflict. She was obsessive. She was oppressive. She was out for blood. My blood. I am Suzanne LeGrand, and this is The Case of the Missing Home. "We have got to up our game," Lorelei yelled from the kitchen, furiously smashing ants who dared cross her kitchen counter into tiny specks of black oblivion. The peace bumper sticker on her car, her left-leaning politics, and her obsessive relationship to recycling in the name of saving the environment did not extend to ants. She stabbed each one with her bare thumbs, filling the crease of the window sill with cayenne, which she read was like napalm to ants. Still, they found a way in. Believing that they were attracted to food crumbs, she bought a plastic container with a button seal to seal out any possible aroma from our kitchen compost. Still, the ants came. She put a tray of water under the cat food dish to drown out the intruders. But still, they came. Her house was built on an anthill, and everyone on the block had regular ant visitations. But to Lorelei, it was personal. Their presence, clear evidence that I had once again fallen down, doing my minimal responsibilities as housemate to keep the kitchen clean. Every summer the ants appeared, and again in the dead of winter, and her response was always an angry one, involving shrieking, followed by a massacre, and a conversation about how we, meaning I, needed to once again up my game, meaning I wasn't paying attention, had grown lax in my cleaning of the common areas, again. She hated to remind me. "I'm not your mother," she fumed. In these scenarios, I was cast in the role of the oblivious, irresponsible, uncaring child, not unlike her daughter, who showed up twice a year, only when she needed money, never stayed over, and, in Lorelei's eyes, could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, could do nothing right. For one thing, I didn't muster the proper level of anger and hostility that she believed was required to demonstrate that I was taking the ant situation seriously. In the scope of bothersome things, ants was fairly low on my list of priorities. I was way too busy trying to keep the peace and head off another unpleasant confrontation. Any time I stepped into the kitchen and she was near, I risked the possibility of being cornered. Preparing food extended the possibility, as did the time it took to cook the food, not to mention the possibility of using the counter and the sink or the dishes. I thought I could minimize the conflict by using only my own dishes and keeping them on a separate shelf. Every time we had a fight, I noted what it was she found objectionable, and I added that to my list of things to mentally check off. The first months of our living together, we had several conversations about the bathroom, how the lid had to always be kept down, how the blinds needed to be halfway up but never crooked, how the shower spigot needed to be at a certain angle so as not to later drip. When I was not at home, she wanted me to leave the door to my bedroom door open so that the light would enter the living room, and she regularly came in my bedroom to adjust the blinds to her liking. At first, I thought I could avoid these constant conflicts by accommodating her. It had worked for the living room and the bathroom, but the kitchen was a landmine of opportunities for what she saw as my cleaning oversights, all of which she thought were necessary and reasonable, and even if they were neither, it was her house, and this is what she required. Once I cooked pasta on the stovetop, and she complained that I had not cleaned up afterwards. I was confused because I remember wiping under the burners and around the stove. I went back to look at the stove to see what I had missed. She took off all 4 burners and lifted up the entire stovetop, And underneath, lo and behold, there was a pool of something gooey that had boiled over at some point, probably not recently. I was dumbfounded. So you want me to lift up the stovetop every time I cook and make sure underneath the stove is clear? Yes, she affirmed, as if this were a normal everyday level of cleaning. Lorelei admitted that she had high standards. Measured as I was every day by her standards, I could only be slovenly and wanting. Still, the ants came. It was because there was a grain of rice that I left in the kitchen drain, or I had not sufficiently wiped up the bits of food behind the kitchen faucet. I asked to be shown these bits of food, but she had already cleaned them up. She implied that the problem was my sight. It's true I needed reading glasses to see up close, but even with my reading glasses on, wiping multiple times, I could never see the food crumbs that so offended her. Why don't you take a picture with your phone, I suggested, next time it happens, and I will go immediately and clean it up. It's hard for me to fix something if I can't see what it is. I shouldn't have to tell you, she countered. You should already know. I've told you 1,000 times. This is how things had been for quite a while, when Joyce reached out and asked me if I knew of anyone looking for a housemate. Remembering all the other terrible housemates and housing situations in the past, I was thankful that at least my housing situation at present was relatively stable. I liked the neighborhood where I lived, and Lorelei had a cat, Shadow, who sometimes slept on my bed. The rent was cheap and what I could afford, half of what it would be anywhere else. There was another housemate who lived in the basement who was kind and also had a cat. The presence of cats in the house helped to smooth over the tensions between Lorelei and I. Still, my forays into the underworld in search of healing for Joyce had opened up an invisible crack, running just under the surface, and I could feel the gap underneath me widening. I teetered, trying to find solid footing. Joyce was right there, too, just a bit further on the ledge than I was. In my efforts to help Joyce find a home, my own housing situation began to fall apart. It was something small that finally pushed me over the edge. Something as small as ants. Toast crumbs. This has been the case of the missing home. Stay tuned to find out what happens next.